It was one of those nights where the campus felt almost too quiet. You know, the kind of quiet where you can hear the wind rustling through the trees and your own footsteps echoing off the empty buildings. Normally, I liked that peacefulness. It was the perfect time to think or unwind after a long day of classes. But on this night, that silence felt heavy, ominous even. I had stayed late at the library, cramming for a midterm I'd put off for too long. The library had been bustling earlier in the evening, but by the time I packed up my things, it was nearly midnight, and the once crowded study areas were mostly empty. I grabbed my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and headed out the doors into the crisp night air. It wasn't unusual for me to walk back to my dorm alone, even this late. Campus always felt safe, familiar. But that night, something was different. At first, I didn't notice him. I was too wrapped up in my thoughts, replaying bits of information in my head and mentally going over what I still needed to study. The path between the library and my dorm was well lit and usually felt safe enough. I was halfway down the main stretch when I felt it, the prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. You know how sometimes you just feel it? I glanced over my shoulder, trying to be casual about it, and that's when I saw him. He was about 20 feet behind me, walking at a steady pace. A guy, probably a student, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, hands in his pockets. Nothing too weird, right? It was a campus, and people walked around all the time. But there was something about him that set off alarm bells in my head. Maybe it was how he kept his head down, his face hidden, or how he didn't seem to be in any particular hurry, yet matched my pace exactly. I took a deep breath and told myself I was being paranoid. People walked behind each other all the time. He probably lived in the dorms too, just like me. But as I kept walking, the uneasy feeling grew. Every time I glanced back, he was there, always the same distance behind, never getting closer or further away. The rational part of my brain tried to reason with me. It's nothing. You're tired. You're stressed. But my gut told me otherwise. I reached the edge of the quad, a wide open space with benches, pathways, and patches of grass. Normally, it would have been filled with students lounging around or playing frisbee, but now it was deserted. I could either keep going straight toward the dorms or take a shortcut through a narrower path between some buildings. I hesitated for a moment, weighing my options. Going through the shortcut would get me home faster, but if this guy was actually following me, I'd be more isolated there. I decided to keep going straight, where the lights were brighter and there were more open spaces. Maybe it was safer that way. The air felt colder now, and I couldn't help but glance back again. He was still there, the same distance behind me, like a shadow. My heart started to race, and I found myself speeding up without even realizing it. I wasn't running, but my pace was definitely faster. The quiet night suddenly felt suffocating, like the weight of the silence was pressing down on me. I thought about texting someone, my roommate maybe, but then I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, there's a guy walking behind me. Can you come meet me? It sounded ridiculous in my head. For all I knew, this guy was just walking back to his own dorm, minding his business, and I was jumping to conclusions. Still, my instincts screamed at me that something was wrong. As I neared the dorms, I started planning my next move. If he followed me all the way to the entrance, that would be my confirmation. No way would he just happen to be walking the exact same path as me for this long without it meaning something. My stomach twisted at the thought. What would I do if he was following me? Run. Confront him. I reached the corner that led to the dorm courtyard and made a sudden decision. Instead of heading toward the dorm directly, pretending like I was going toward the student center. I figured if he wasn't following me, he'd keep going straight toward the dorms. If he turned with me, then I'd know. I walked a few more steps, heart pounding in my chest. Then slowly, I glanced over my shoulder. He had turned too. My pulse skyrocketed. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. He was following me. There was no doubt about it. I quickly looked around, trying to figure out my next move. The student center was closed at this hour, and the path I was on was empty. There wasn't anyone around. I couldn't make a run for it without drawing attention to myself. But if I didn't do something soon, he'd get closer. I picked up the pace, my footsteps louder against the pavement, and reached for my phone. My fingers were shaking as I tried to pull up my contacts. My mind raced with possibilities. Should I call campus security? Should I pretend to call someone and hope it would scare him off? Before I could decide, I heard footsteps behind me, quicker this time. Panic surged through me. He was getting closer. I didn't have time to think. Without looking back, I bolted toward the dorms, my heart pounding in my ears, my breath coming in short gasps. The dorm entrance was just ahead. If I could get there, if I could just make it to the door, I'd be safe. I reached the door, fumbling with my keycard as I swiped it at the reader. My hands were shaking so badly I thought I'd drop it, but the lock clicked open and I shoved the door wide, darting inside. I slammed the door shut behind me, my back pressed against the cool metal as I tried to catch my breath. For a moment, everything was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. Slowly, I peered through the glass window in the door. He was standing just outside. His face was still hidden by the hood, but I could feel his eyes on me, like he was studying me through the glass. He didn't move. He didn't try to follow me inside. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching me. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the night. I stood there for a long time, frozen, until I was sure he was gone. My legs felt like jelly, my heart still racing, but I was safe. I was inside. But that night, the campus didn't feel safe anymore. That quiet walk back to the dorm, it would never feel the same again.